Hi, I'm Michael Lang with Nexul Academy. This video is part of an introductory course on building websites with HTML and CSS. So we're going to start by looking at VS Code. We're going to build some some websites with that editor called VS Code. So let's go ahead and dive right on in. So I'm going to switch over to VS Code here, and we'll see we've got a file menu at the top, along with some other things. We've got a side nav over here. This has some common views that we might want to look at. The first one we're going to look at is the folder explorer, the project explorer. There's another way to say it. So the first thing you want to do is we want to open a folder to work on. VS Code doesn't really have project files. You just open a folder and you put all your files in the folder, and then you could run your website from that folder. So when you open up, initially you might not see anything. You might see this big white background. You'll just want to click on this Explorer icon over here, and then there's a button for Open Folder. You can also clone a repository if you're pulling down a Git repo. You can see our Git course for more on that. So I'm going to go ahead and select the Open Folder option. And I typically want to put all my projects in the same top level folder so that I always know where to find them. So whether that's under your My Documents somewhere or on your local machine, either way is fine. Sometimes we want to stay away from doing it in Dropbox folders or any other online folder file sharing service. So just keep that in mind. We use Git for backup. Using a file share service is probably not the best way to go. So I've just got a folder called dev under my C drive. I'm going to create a new folder here. And I'm going to call it HTML CSS demo. So, and then I'm just going to click on the folder and click select folder. All right, so now I've got an empty project ready to go. Over here in Explorer, you can see that it's got a folder view, and when I open it, there's nothing in it. So I just need to create my first file. I'm going to click the Add File icon, create an index.html. All right, so now I've got a blank document. An HTML file is hypertext markup language. It is the kind of way to specify the content for a page, and it's what every browser expects to download for a web page. There's a few things that go into an HTML document. It's all based around your content, but everything is built up with something called tags. A tag is something that starts with an angle bracket, and then it has the tag name. So in this case, we're going to start the HTML document. So we'll start with the HTML tag, and then an ending angle bracket. Now that will, in VS Code, it'll go ahead and build the closing one for you. So I didn't have to type what came after the cursor here. I can just hit enter and then to put some space in here so I can start typing. But notice the ending tag has a slash in front of it. This is how the browser knows that when it's downloading this page that, oh, this closing goes with whatever opening tag of the same name matches it. So in this case, this HTML tag matches this one. And VS Code knows this as well, because when I click on it, it highlights the closing tag that matches. If you want to hover over a tag, VS Code will also give you some hints about that tag in general. And if you wanted some more details on some tags, you could just click on MDN reference. It'll ask you if you want to open an external site. And we'll open that. And it opened another tab here. Here we go. So it opened up documentation on that particular tag. All right, so we're going to dive into how do we build the content of the page. Inside of an HTML document, there's two main areas. There's a head and a body. The head is another tag, and that declares stuff that's not content you see in the page. It's more metadata about the page. Things maybe search engines will look at, and also things that social sites will look at to determine what should the preview text be or the default text be when you share that page on a social media site. There's also things like a title tag, and this will control the tab in the browser and what it says, you know, like it's up top of Chrome or Firefox, what it'll say for that page name. So I'm just going to put in here, welcome to HTML as the title, and we'll see that in a few moments and how that looks on the page. The other main part, like I said before, is the body. So there's a tag called body. It creates its own closing tag as well when you create the opening tag. Now in here, this declares all the content of the page. So there's, as you've seen on lots of pages, there's headings, there's paragraphs, there's large text, there's small text, there's text that's over to the side. You know, there's different ways of declaring text on a page. But a lot of that positional stuff and sizing is normally controlled through CSS, and so we'll come back around to that. But there are still some more semantic meanings that we want to keep in our HTML. We don't want to control all the text size only with style. We also want semantics to determine what is the heading of this page. Because search engines will look at that and they'll say, oh, the heading, that's what they're going to put as that shared title. So you really want to make sure that you use heading tags appropriately for search engines. It also gives weight to those text elements on a page in the eyes of that search engine. All right, so I'm going to start with a heading tag. Heading tags start with H, and then there's 1 through 6. So 1 is the biggest, 6 is the smallest. We're typically going to stick with H1 through H4 because that's the most levels most sites go down to. And actually, if you get down to H5 and 6, a lot of times that text is smaller than your paragraph text, unless you do something through CSS to make them bigger. So we're typically going to stay in H1 through 3. Sometimes you might go to H4. I've rarely gone to H5 or H6, if ever. So I'm going to start with an H1 tag. This will be my main heading. I'm just going to say, welcome to HTML again. All right, and I'm going to go to the end and hit enter. And then I'm going to go ahead and create, let's say, a paragraph on the page. Paragraphs, well, if you don't know what tags there are, you can just open angle bracket. VS Code will give a lot of suggestions here. Paragraph is somewhere in this list. There we go. So it doesn't say paragraph, it starts with P. So you just have to look at it and say, well, it's close, is that it? And you just hover over it and say, oh yeah, it represents a paragraph, good, okay. So sometimes you gotta do a little hacking to figure out what things mean. And by hacking, I just mean type, experiment, check it out, see what it does. Okay, I don't mean hack into a website and steal their data. So, so now I've got a paragraph. I can put some space in here as much as I want. I can type a lorem ipsum kind of paragraph, and there we go, I've got a big paragraph. That little shortcut I did there, that was just an editor shortcut. So as you can see here, as I typed LOR, it said, oh, there's an Emmet abbreviation. Emmet is just a way to get a lot of shortcuts in place. So again, if I just hit tab when that pops up, it'll type in that full text. Now it's really long. It's not going to wrap automatically like Microsoft Word does or any other Google Docs or any other kind of word processor. So if you want to format, there's a shortcut in VS Code, Shift-Alt-F, and it'll format the document. And so what that does, one thing, it'll line up tags so that the closing tags are below the opening tags so that they line up. It will also make it so the width isn't too big. So it's easier to read your code in the code window. All right, so I've got 2 paragraphs. Now I think it's time to go look at what this page looks like. So there's 2 ways to do that. You can open this page in Explorer. Let's see, I'm going to do Reveal in File Explorer. This capability comes out of the box with VS Code. All right, so now it has opened that folder on my machine, so I can just double click the HTML file and it will open up, and it came to another monitor again. Okay, so there we go. There is our page. You can see at the top it says welcome to HTML. That is that title tag. If you remember over here, we had this welcome to HTML title. We also had a heading called welcome to HTML, and that one is down here on the page. Just in case you don't believe me, I'll just put a 1 down here in this one. Let's refresh that page. And we'll see there's a 1 there, not up here. So now we can tell they're different. All right, and so notice our paragraphs are wrapping on the page as much as we need to. So the browser does handle that automatically. There's no special code required. Okay, so there's another way to open an HTML file. If we notice up here at the top of this one, it says C:dev. It's got the full path and then the file name. This will cause problems later on when we do relative pathing to resources, and we'll get into that later in another video. But so there's a better way to open a page. Also, there's another drawback to this. If I change the content and save the file and I switch back over, it's not updating the page. I have to hit the refresh icon, and now it will show the new content of that page. So I'm going to do it another way. In order to do this, you have to install an extension. So there's at the bottom of the side nav here, there's an extensions icon. Click on that. There's an extension called Live server. And you can tell right now I have it installed because it has an uninstall button. If it says install here, click it and to get it installed. Okay, so now that I have that, when you're inside of an HTML document, when you right click, there's now a menu item called Open with Live Server. So it's going to use that extension. So I'll go ahead and click on that and see here, open another page again. It looks like the same page. VS Code also showed this prompt that says starting a server is started at port 5500. And it says it's an extension, so we know where that's coming from. Now over here we have the same page. So we've got the same page on both. I think one is just zoomed in. There we go. So now they're identical. You can zoom in with Control Zoom Wheel. So now that they're 100%, they look identical. The only thing different is the URL in the address bar. So right here we got the C:dev one. That's the one that I just double-clicked in File Explorer. The other one has 127.0.0.1:5500. So 127.0.0.1 is the address pointing at your local computer. That is the case cross-platform, Windows, Mac, Linux. It just means point at this address. The port number 5500 is just so that you can have multiple websites running in your machine and each one could go to a different website. So if I open another VS Code, it said open in live server, it would give me a different port number for that site. And so I could run them both at one time. Otherwise, if you just had the address 127.0.0.1, both of them could not possibly be at that same location. They would have to have something different. So only one would be able to run at a time if you didn't have a port number. So that's why live server gives you a port number. And notice our file name is directly under the domain portion of the address. So this is always considered the domain. This would be something like example.com when you deploy this site up to a server. So it's at the root level. So now if I do relative pathing later on, which we'll get to later, if we say relative from the root, it'll start at this point. If we say relative from the root in this one, it's going to go to the C drive. And so it's going to look for a resource way up here at the dev level, which is probably not where you're going to store your files for the project down in the demo project. So that's the main reason this is good. Another reason, if I change this content on the page, save it, as soon as I switch over, it's already updated the page. It's monitoring the files changing and it's updating the code window immediately. Okay. All right, so that's the main parts of HTML. Now I want to show you how to debug your HTML before we end this lesson and move on. So when we've got a page here, if we want to see how this works, maybe nothing showed up and you're wondering why did nothing show up for this page? Or why does it look incorrect? That's not what I thought the code looked like. You can right click on the page. View page source is one way to do it. This will just show you the code that was downloaded when you downloaded this page from the server. So we can see here we've got our markup, we got a body tag, we got a heading and some paragraphs. And this was injected by live server to make the refresh work. So that's not really part of the code we wrote. It's something live server injected. So that's just the raw HTML, and there's nothing I can do with this. All I can do is copy it out, paste it in a document, but I can't use it. I can't edit it or change it right here and update the page. So the other way is to right click and say inspect. Now when I do this, it opens up the developer tools so I can actually change stuff about the page. You see here there's an elements tab at the top. There's console, network, and other things at the top here. We'll dive into some of those in some future videos. Right now we're going to look at the elements. Now it shows it as a collapsible tree, so it makes it easier if you're in a large page to figure out the structure of this page. So we can just expand individual parts at a time by clicking on the little tick mark there. It shows that it's opened or collapsed with the direction of the arrow. And as we hover over each element in here, notice on the page on the left, it's highlighting that element on the page. So we can see, oh, that's the element that represents this particular element on the page. So you can see what lines up with what. All right, and you see there's some funny colors around the elements. We'll get to that in a moment. You can also expand this. You can see, oh yeah, there's the title. That's what I see up there. It's not actually going to highlight the title in the top of the browser because the Chrome tools only have control over the browser document window. So if I expand these, we see what's inside. If I wanted this text to see something different, just say, well, what if it said something different for a test? I could just type in here, click away, and now it's updated that content. If I look over at my source code, it didn't change that. So this is not going to update your source. It's also not going to update the server if this was deployed. So if I update this, it's not going to change it for anybody else. It's only changing it for me. This is just a debugging tool. This is a way to see, well, what if? What if it said this? How would it look on the page? So it's like, you know, that title looks a little odd. I'll edit the HTML. What if this is a second level heading instead? So I can do that. Click away. It's like, oh, okay, so that looks like that. That's what a second level heading looks like. All right. So notice there were two ones there. I could do edit as HTML. That let me change the tags also. And it only edits the ones that you clicked on. So if I wanted to edit the body, I couldn't do it there. I'd have to click up here in body and say edit as HTML. Now I can edit the whole thing. Okay, so it matters where you click and before you click the menu item. There's also edit text, so that's not highlighting the tags. It's just you want to change the content inside of it. So just check out which one you're actually clicking on here. All right, so let's talk about what these borders around the objects are in the debugger. So as I highlight over this paragraph, there's some blue and there's some orange. So if we look here to the right, there's also styles. So styles is within the elements tab. If I click something else, the styles is going away. So the elements tab has styles as a child tabbed window underneath of it. When you click on an element, it's showing the style that is making that element look the way that it does. So this could be inline style in HTML. It could be CSS, which we'll get to in a future video. But this is all the rules that affect that particular element. Of note here are these colors in these boxes around here. This is showing the different parts of that element. So we're looking at the element that has text in the body. You can see down here, this first number inside, this is the blue area. This is what is the size of that raw element. You can see it takes the full width. It's not just the word text, because this is a block element. We could tell that up here. It says display block. So it's going to take the full width of the page and then as high as it needs to for what the content is. There's other display types where it only take up the width that it needs also. We'll come around to that in a future video. So right now, here's the size. It says how big it is. If I resize the window, that is changing. It's changing to match the actual size of that rendered element. Okay. There's another thing, padding. Padding is the space on the outside of the inner content of an item before you get to the border. Then we have the border. And then outside the border, there's a margin to space it away from other things. So if we wanted to see what some of that looked like, we can actually type up here in the element style. We could say, well, what if padding was 6 pixels? So now we can see that paragraph has got another green section around it in the document up there. This other one does not. And you can see they're not lined up anymore. So lorem is further to the left than the word test because it's got a padding inside the element of 6 pixels to push it inward from that element. There's also borders. So we could say border, let's say just for illustration, we want a 4 pixel border. So we want it kind of wide. It's not showing anything yet because there's 3 parts that make up a border. There's how wide, there's a line style. The typical one is solid. There's also dashed. There's also dotted. And actually, if I just, okay, let's pick dotted, and then I need to pick a color. The default color will be black, but I'm going to go ahead and pick, let's see, 60s. Pick that gray color. All right, so that's a gray color. It'll look yellow for a moment because I was highlighting over it. So that's just the border being highlighted from down here. Okay. All right, so now that I've got dotted border, style, and now here we can see what all the different options are. So if you want to try out different ones. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it as the single specification for all 3 parts. All right, so we've changed some of that stuff. If I come over and look at my source code, none of that is still here. If I refresh the page, all of these changes are going to disappear. This is only for experimentation. Keep that in mind. So if I wanted to keep this, I would have to copy this out of here. So you just highlight it, hit Control C, or you can right click and pick copy, and then you can come over to your code and you could paste it in somewhere. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page, and we'll be back to what the document is actually written to be in the source code. Let's just go ahead and look at another site. I'm going to open up Get Bootstrap. You know, it's kind of a nice looking page here. So we can also right click on this page and inspect it. If you want to see how this page works, right click and inspect it. We can see here there's lots of elements. Here's our body. We've got some anchors. We've got a header up at the top. That's that bar right at the top. So you can say, oh, well, how's that work? You can actually take this HTML. From most sites, you could do this. Some sites make it kind of hard to get all the style and everything so you get it all to make your page. But you can copy this element, edit as HTML. I can just copy the whole thing and I can go put it in my document somewhere. Or if nothing else, I can just look at it to see, well, how does it work? So check it out. We can see, well, what elements does it have to make up this look of a page? Maybe you want to see how did the text get that big or that font style. You can also just right click on the page and say, okay, I want this icon right here. Let's inspect that and see what that is. It highlights it down here. And we can see this is a path which is inside of an SVG. So SVG is kind of a type of an image that is vector based. It doesn't have pixels inside of it. It just says what all the points are so that it can draw it at a large size and it still looks just as crisp and clean as it does at the small size. And it's a really small size file. It doesn't have to specify the color of every pixel in that image. So this is an SVG. So if I wanted this SVG, I can just copy this. That is HTML. I can copy this. Now I have the SVG. I can create a .svg file in my folder and paste this in as the contents, and I would now have this icon. So image.svg. Just paste this on in there. There we go. There we go. Now I have that SVG. I can put it in my page if I want to. Watch licensing around that. You want to make sure that you're not stealing icons from places. If you're taking an icon that's free and open and there's an open license, great, go take it. But make sure you're not stealing from a paid icon site. All right, so that's how you can check around what's on a page. You could look at an item and you could see, well, how did, what color is this? You can inspect something and see what color it is as well. So down here, let's see. Okay, here's some colors. Here's the color set they're using on this page. And we can just explore around and see what colors are assigned to individual elements. Like, okay, here we go. This has a background color of that. Okay, so maybe that's a color and a style that you want to copy and put it in another project. So I would encourage you to go check out a bunch of other sites, see what makes them tick, check them out, use your debugging tools, just try it out. There's, on Bootstrap specifically, I came here because they have a great examples page. If you want to click on one of these, let's say, well, maybe you like the look of this blog one. Okay, click on here. Not only can you inspect it and just see how it works, okay, we could still do that. They also have an option to download these. So back on this page, this one doesn't actually have a download. Their downloadable ones are over here on the themes. Okay, so you can download their themes, and they give you all the source files, all the styles, and so you just copy paste into a document. Makes it a lot easier. Okay, but they do make it easy to open these, and you can just inspect them and see how they're working. And like I said, there's also this view page source. You can download that also for this template site. Sometimes some content is dynamically loaded, so you won't get it all. So you could do a combination of inspecting it, come over to sources, and you can get all the files that were included. So in case here, we've got a CSS file, and we've got some other files here as well. So there might be a bunch of files to download. You'd want to get all of these files. And here we go. Here is the index.html file. So you'd need all of these files to replicate this site exactly. All right, so that's part of our video series on getting into HTML and CSS. I hope it was helpful. You can check out more of our courseware at nexulacademy.com. And let's have a session to see what kind of training is right for you, and we could put you in one of our training programs. You can also go to nexulacademy.com/courseware and you can just try out this free introductory HTML course. There's some more videos as well, or check out the other videos on the YouTube channel. See you in the next video.